For centuries, Earth had watched the stars but stayed silent, learning. While ancient empires ruled the galaxy with arrogance, humanity had remained unnoticed, small and seemingly unimportant, a minor species on the edge of known space. The galaxy's great powers, the Zarketh Dominion, the Solarian Accord, and the mysterious Elithari Ascendancy fought wars, signed treaties, and expanded their borders, ignoring the small blue planet that quietly sent out probes and built colonies in the shadows of the stars. Earth's expansion was slow, careful, and unnoticed, until it wasn't. The Terran colony on Aramis via a peaceful world rich with minerals was destroyed without warning. Over 10,000 human lives were lost in a single Zarketh strike. The attack wasn't even strategic. It was a message, a show of force against what the Zarketh considered a squatting species in their claimed space. The transmission sent to Earth was short and cruel: leave, or be erased. No trial, no negotiations, no mercy. What the Zarketh didn't understand was that humanity was not the same as when it first looked up at the stars. Earth had long abandoned its divisions, uniting under the banner of the United Terran Command, not out of idealism, but out of need. They had seen the galaxy's dangers. They had prepared in silence. And now, for the first time, Earth would speak, and it would speak through a weapon. From deep within the asteroid city of Typhon Forge, Earth launched the IST Wrath of Terra, its first and only dreadnought, a ship built not just for defense, but for message-sending force. It was massive, layered with black reflective armor, shaped like a spear, and powered by a core so advanced even the Elithari would have paused to study it. The galaxy had never seen it before. Earth had kept it hidden for decades, feeding it technology, testing its weapons, training its crew in secret simulation. It didn't need an escort. It didn't need reinforcements. The Wrath of Terra was all Earth needed. And now, it jumped into orbit above Veltrax Prime, one of Zarketh's major Outer Rim colonies, catching the local defense fleet completely off guard. Sensors failed to classify the Terran ship. They had no record of it. No data. To the Zarketh scanners, it was a ghost, a black void in the sky. Captain Rhea Morgan, a woman known for her calm demeanor and brutal decisiveness, stood at the center of the command deck, watching the alien planet spin slowly below. Her crew of elite officers moved quickly but quietly, each one trained for this exact moment. The bridge was a mixture of old Earth naval tradition and cutting-edge AI assistance. Lights blinked softly. Holograms displayed incoming alerts. Enemy ships were moving to intercept. "Open channel," Captain Morgan said, her voice quiet but firm. A moment later, her message was sent, not encrypted, not hidden, broadcast wide and clear for every ship, every planet, every station in the sector to hear. "This is Captain Rhea Morgan of the Wrath of Terra, United Terran Command. You harmed our people. You destroyed innocent lives. We are not diplomats. We are not messengers. We are justice. You have 30 minutes to surrender your local military command and open all records of the Aramis attack. Failure to comply will be answered with force." There was no reply, not for several long, heavy minutes. Then came laughter over the comms. Zarketh voices, cold and mechanical, called the message a joke. They mocked the ship, mocked Earth. A single ship, they said, was a fool's challenge. They sent a dozen war cruisers to meet it. The sky lit up with plasma beams and fusion torpedoes as the Zarketh ships fired first, but the Wrath of Terra didn't move. Its shield systems absorbed the energy, dispersing it like waves hitting a mountain. "Authorization, counterstrike," Morgan said. A single shot was fired. The weapon was the Valkyrie Lance, an energy burst so dense it tore through the vacuum and struck 3 enemy ships in perfect alignment. All three exploded within seconds. The rest hesitated. The Wrath's next salvo was precise. It didn't wipe them out, it crippled their engines and weapons, disabling them without killing every crew aboard. Earth didn't want war. It wanted a message to be heard. The Zarketh Command Center on Veltrax Prime went dark. No more jokes. No more threats. Silence. And in that silence, fear. Across the galaxy, listening posts picked up the message. Old powers raised their heads. The Solarian Accord scheduled an emergency summit. The Elithiri remained quiet but shifted fleets subtly in their regions of space. Who were these humans? Where did they get such power? On board the Wrath, the crew remained steady. Captain Morgan knew this was only the beginning. Lieutenant Vega, the ship's cybernetic intelligence officer, reported an odd data echo from Zarketh's transmissions evidence that another signal had interfered before the Aramis attack, possibly faking part of the orders. Suspicion formed. Was Zarketh the true enemy, or had someone else wanted to provoke Earth? But the time for analysis was brief. A new fleet was inbound. Bigger. Stronger. Earth's message had been sent, but the galaxy wasn't ready to listen. And as the stars lit up with enemy warp signatures, one thing became clear: the silence was over. The storm had begun. The moment the Zarketh Command Center on Veltrax Prime went dark, silence fell across the orbit. Earth's attack had shattered the illusion of alien superiority, and now pride demanded retaliation. Deep within the Zarketh Dominion, war horns were sounded. The Empire had never been challenged like this by a species it once called planet-locked primitives. In less than 12 hours, 39 capital ships were in motion, including 5 Dread-class vessels and dozens of escort squadrons. This was not a patrol force. It was a full armada. Their mission was simple: crush the human warship and drag its wreckage back through hyperspace as a warning to Earth. But what the Zarketh didn't know was that the Wrath of Terra had been built for this exact moment. Orbiting Veltrax Prime in silence, the ship waited like a predator in the dark. Its sensors had picked up the incoming wave long before they emerged from hyperspace. Captain Rhea Morgan stood on the bridge, her hands folded behind her back, eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. She knew what was coming. She had seen the simulation. Earth's intelligence had predicted the Zarketh's response almost perfectly. But numbers weren't everything. Earth didn't rely on brute force. It relied on precision, speed, and something the galaxy rarely expected: human adaptability. Lieutenant Vega, his mind enhanced by neural threads and connected directly to the ship's strategic AI, spoke first. Fleet dropping from hyperspace. Estimated 200 combat units. Their formation is tight. They're going for overwhelming force. Captain Morgan didn't flinch. Good. Let them think it's enough. The stars shimmered and warped as the Zarketh fleet arrived. One by one, their ships tore through space-time, exiting hyperspace in massive flashes of energy. They filled the sky like a storm of iron and flame. Red energy signatures. Forward weapons hot. Missile bays charging. The lead Zarketh dreadnought broadcast a warning in its native tongue, sharp, metallic syllables promising death. But Earth didn't answer with words. It answered with movement. The Wrath of Terra powered forward, engines humming with a low, powerful vibration that echoed through every deck. Its targeting systems came alive. At Captain Morgan's signal, Earth struck first. The Valkyrie lance fired again, but this time with amplified power, piercing the shields of a Zarketh battleship and splitting it clean in two. At the same time, a dozen Earth-engineered drone fighters launched from the ship's lower bay sleek, intelligent machines called Falcons. Each Falcon was equipped with adaptive camouflage, micro-thrusters, and plasma edge weaponry. They moved like ghosts, targeting critical weak points, disabling engines, and carving through enemy sensor arrays. The Zarketh, used to slow, predictable battles, were caught off guard. Several ships lost targeting within the first 5 minutes. 2 frigates collided as their guidance systems failed. Panic spread through their lines. Yet the Zarketh kept coming. Their sheer numbers pressed forward, surrounding the Wrath in a 3-dimensional web of fire. Dozens of plasma bolts rained down, some crashing against the Terran shields, sending shockwaves through the hull. Inside, lights flickered briefly, but no systems failed. Earth's engineers had built the Wrath to take punishment and return it tenfold. Shields holding at 93%, Vega reported. Recharging core in 30 seconds. Morgan nodded. Let's make them regret surrounding us. The Wrath deployed its secondary weapon system, the Halo Array. It was not a beam or missile, but a burst of micro-pulse mines, each one programmed to detonate with directional force. Released in a spiral, the mines exploded around the ship like a spinning ring of light, shredding the closest Zarketh fighters and tearing holes in the outer layers of capital ship armor. Enemy formations broke as ships veered off course, trying to avoid the deadly ring. It was chaos and space flames, wreckage, scattered squadrons, and static-choked screams filling enemy comms. Yet, amid the fury, the Wrath of Terra moved like a shark in open water calm, deadly, and always one step ahead. Below the bridge, Commander Arun led the internal defense crew. "Enemy boarding pods incoming," he called out. Small spikes of metal had launched from Zarketh ships during the firefight, hoping to latch onto the Wrath's hull and deliver boarding parties. But the Terran ship's hull wasn't just metal, it was reactive armor, embedded with smart nanites. As soon as the pods made contact, the nanites activated, crawling over the metal and cracking the pods open before they could release a single soldier. Inside, the invaders died without firing a shot. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Vega detected something strange, an anomaly behind the Zarketh fleet. A single large ship not engaging, not transmitting, simply watching. It wasn't Zarketh. It wasn't anything Earth had classified. Morgan narrowed her eyes. Tag it. Observe only. Don't provoke it yet. She had a feeling this wasn't just a battle. It was a test. Someone else was watching. But her focus remained on the current threat. More Zarketh ships tried to flank the Wrath from below, targeting its power core. Earth's AI predicted the move 2 minutes early, and with a single command, the ship flipped its orientation in space, a maneuver impossible for a ship of its size according to conventional physics. But the Wrath wasn't conventional. Its gravity systems adapted instantly, keeping the crew stable. Its cannons rotated with perfect synchronization. A full volley fired into the approaching ships, blasting them apart before they could even fire. The crew didn't cheer. There was no time. Vega warned, multiple signatures moving in from behind. "They're trying to trap us." "Not yet, they won't," Morgan replied. "Engage Pulse Cloak." "We're cutting through." The Pulse Cloak activated, wrapping the ship in a short burst of light-bending energy that scrambled sensors and masked its movement. In one smooth glide, the Wrath slid past the inner ring of enemy cruisers, appearing suddenly behind the densest cluster of Zarketh warships. Before they could react, Earth's dreadnought fired its shockwave cannon, a weapon designed not to destroy, but to disable electronics. A blue ripple of energy spread out like a tidal wave. 30 enemy ships froze in place, systems shorted, weapons dead. The Wrath didn't wait. It fired again and again, clean, focused shots that destroyed only what was necessary. In under 20 minutes, half the Zarketh fleet had been rendered inoperable. Another third was retreating. The rest were either destroyed or dead in space. The battle wasn't just a win. It was a lesson. Earth had arrived on the galactic stage, and it wasn't asking for a seat. It was taking one. But Captain Morgan wasn't celebrating. She turned to Vega. "That watcher still there?" Vega nodded. "No change. Still observing. Not Zarketh. Possibly Elitheri." The Elitheri. The name was a whisper in human intelligence circles. A race of manipulators, never attacking directly, always pushing others into war. Morgan didn't trust them. "Log its pattern. If it makes a move, I want to know before it blinks." She turned her attention back to the wreckage. Veltrax Prime was still untouched. The planet's military leaders had gone silent since. The battle began, their orbital defenses now powerless, their fleet destroyed or fleeing. A new message was sent, this time directly to the Zarketh homeworld. This is not revenge. This is response. Earth will not be ignored. We will not be victims. Withdraw from all disputed systems. Turn over those responsible for Aramis VI. Or we return. No threats. Just clarity. The response took an hour. A Zarketh lord answered, his face tight with barely hidden fear. He tried to speak with authority, but the tremble in his voice betrayed him. He promised to relay the demands to the Emperor. Morgan gave him 72 hours. Then she cut the line. The battle was over, but the war had only just begun. Back on Earth, the footage was already spreading. The people, once cautious, now stood taller. The name Wrath of Terra echoed through media, politics, and military briefings. But not everyone was cheering. In the deep reaches of the galaxy, the Elithari ship finally moved. It didn't retreat. It simply vanished. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, not through hyperspace, but through a tear in reality. Vega recorded it, sent the data for analysis, and marked it with a simple label, Unknown Potential Threat Level, Extreme. Meanwhile, Captain Morgan stood in her quarters, looking out at the remains of the enemy fleet drifting in silence. She didn't feel pride. She felt warning. Power invited challenge. Earth had proven itself, but the galaxy would not accept that easily. Someone, somewhere, would try to test them again. She knew it. And when they did, Earth would be ready. Because fire had filled the heavens, and humanity had not only survived it, they had become it. In the days that followed, the great battle above Veltrax Prime, the galaxy watched in silence, shaken by what had happened and uncertain of what would come next, as never before had a single Terran ship, unknown and untested by the older species, entered deep space and destroyed a full armada. Without suffering critical damage, and never before had the mighty Zarketh Dominion been brought to its knees by what they once mocked as a backwater world from a system of no strategic importance, but now. Everything had changed, and the galactic powers were suddenly awake and alert, as if jolted from a long and careless dream. Because if Earth could do that with one ship, what else did it have in the shadows? And what was it truly planning? So the leaders of empires and federations gathered in secret chambers and hidden halls to discuss the threat that no one had seen coming, and at the center of every conversation was the name Wrath of Terra, which had already become legend even among those who feared it, while at the same time, the Elithari Ascendancy, a race known not for brute strength but for ancient knowledge and manipulation, analyzed the data from their silent observer ship that had vanished during the battle, and their seer councils whispered that Earth was not simply a danger, it was an anomaly, something that had evolved faster than the timeline should have allowed, and that such rapid progression could not happen without help or without consequences. And in their crystal towers floating above their homeworld, they plotted to uncover what secret fire had awakened on Earth, and how they might either control it or ensure it never spread. While far away, the Solarian Accord held an emergency assembly on their home moon of Tessal, where 12 ruling clans sat around a circular chamber of light and shadow, each speaking with a mix of fear, awe, and resentment, debating whether Earth could be a new ally against the Zarketh, or whether it posed a threat too great to be allowed freedom. And although some among them argued for diplomacy, the war clans spoke louder, demanding action, demanding preemptive strikes or covert sabotage to weaken humanity before it could become unstoppable. Yet their own spies returned only fragments of intel because Earth had already sealed its borders and cloaked its shipyards, and every Terran diplomat had gone silent, replaced by sharp messages and hard deadlines, and in the void left by Earth's quiet power, rumors grew like vines. Some said Earth had a dozen Wrath-class ships waiting in the dark. Others claimed the humans had uncovered forbidden technology from beyond the galactic rim, while still more believed Earth had simply adapted faster because it had always been a world of conflict, and the other species, long used to safety and dominance, had grown soft. But none of those theories answered the real question pulsing beneath every strategy meeting, every encrypted channel, and every sleepless night in the high towers of power. What would Earth do next, and how far was it willing to go? While on Veltrax Prime, Zarketh workers salvaged debris from the battlefield, collecting twisted metal, broken hulls, and blackened circuits, trying to find anything that could explain how their most advanced weapons had failed so completely. And deep in one of the shattered wrecks, a Solarian spy recovered part of an AI core, still flickering with fading code, which he smuggled back to Tessal, where scientists studied it for days, only to find that the Terran systems were not only superior in speed and encryption, but were self-adaptive, learning and rewriting their own algorithms faster than the observers could process, which led to a new theory that Earth had achieved true synthetic intelligence, a living code that could think and change on its own. And if that was true, it meant humanity had crossed the line no other species dared approach, and now they stood on the edge of becoming something more than mortal, something that might outgrow even the need for allies or enemies. And while the empires feared and speculated, Earth remained quiet, too quiet, with no follow-up attack, no threats, and no press statements, only silence and stillness from the blue world that had once begged to join the galactic community and now stood above it, watching, deciding, preparing. And inside the hidden Terran Strategic Command, buried beneath the crust of Mars, high-ranking officers studied responses from every known faction, reading between the lines of diplomatic noise to detect who would bend, who would break, and who would try to strike from the shadows. And at the center of it all, Captain Rhea Morgan sat once again in the command chair of the Wrath of Terra, orbiting a quiet moon near the border systems, where she waited not for orders, but for the next move in a larger game she knew had already begun, because she had seen the unknown ship vanish behind the battlefield. And she knew the real enemy was still watching, testing them, and that the attack on Aramis VI might not have been Zarketh's idea at all, but part of something deeper, something older. And perhaps Earth had not been pulled into a war, it had been invited to one. And now that humanity had accepted, the players would show themselves one by one, and each would try to use Earth, destroy it, or bend it to their will. But what they didn't understand was that Earth had no intention of being used, or destroyed, or bent, because for the first time in galactic history, a world had risen not by favor or conquest, but by the fierce and patient will to survive. And now that it stood tall, it would not bow again. And as the empires reacted, some with fear, some with envy, and some with hidden blades behind smiling masks, the Terrans built quietly, moved silently, and planned carefully, for the storm had not passed. It was only beginning, and somewhere beyond the known stars, something ancient stirred, something not tied to empires or fleets, but to the deep fabric of space and thought. And that something had noticed Earth too. And it was curious, and it was waking up. The silence of space near the Alethari border was different. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, as if even sound itself was afraid to exist there. And as the wrath of Terra drifted into that space under partial cloak, the crew felt the difference, a strange pressure not on their bodies but in their minds, as if unseen eyes were watching from the dark folds of space itself. And Captain Rhea Morgan, seated in her command chair, knew that they were now entering the part of the galaxy where rules were different. Alliances meant nothing, and knowledge was both currency and weapon, because the Elethari ascendancy was not like the Zarketh or the Solarians. They did not conquer with fleets or power. They conquered with influence, secrets, and the manipulation of events so carefully woven that even their enemies didn't know they were being controlled. But Earth had seen enough from the silent ship that had vanished after Veltrax, enough to trace its resonant signature back to a specific region of space avoided by most species, known in old records as the Dragon's Veil, a name from a time when myths still mattered. And according to Earth's long-range sensors and ancient records gathered from derelict libraries, this region was home to at least 5 uncharted structures floating in dead space, ancient, untouched, yet still pulsing faint signals in unknown languages. And now, Earth believed those structures might be linked to the Elethari's true source of power, something deeper than politics or culture, perhaps even pre-galactic. So Morgan had taken the risk and brought the Wrath alone into the shadows, without escort or fleet, because stealth mattered more than force here, and discovery would mean not just failure but likely a full-scale attempt to erase Earth's presence forever. And as they crossed the veil, sensors flickered, lights dimmed, and the AI reported that dimensional interference was distorting their systems in small but growing ways. Yet the ship held together, adjusted its path, and followed the thin pulse of energy left behind by the mysterious vessel from Veltrax, which led them to an ancient construct shaped like a spiral claw, orbiting nothing, just floating in a void of crushed light, where even stars seemed afraid to shine. And the structure pulsed once every few minutes, like a heartbeat, not mechanical, not natural, something in between. And when the Wrath approached, the ship slowed without command, as if the space around it had changed, made thicker somehow. And Vega, always calm, now spoke with a note of concern in his voice as he said, "This region is wrong. Space folds incorrectly here, as if gravity itself has forgotten its rules." But Captain Morgan only nodded, keeping her eyes fixed on the strange claw, because she felt it too, not fear exactly, but a sharpness in her thoughts, like something was trying to understand her from afar. And inside the ship, the crew moved with tight discipline, monitoring for signs of attack, though none came. And finally, they found an entrance, a large broken ring of metal at the base of the structure, leaking faint energy, almost inviting. So they launched a probe, which vanished halfway through the ring, its signal cutting off in a flash, then returning 5 seconds later, reporting an interior space much larger than the exterior should allow, a clear sign of dimensional compression, a technology not even Earth fully understood yet. And when they received a single ping back from inside, a short pulse in a dead language that the AI began to translate automatically, Morgan knew it was no accident. The signal meant one thing: enter. So she gave the order, and the Wrath drifted inside the ring and passed through a membrane of light that stretched like fabric and then snapped shut behind them, sealing them inside. And the view outside changed immediately. The void gave way to a hollow interior shaped like a sphere, with artificial stars embedded in its walls, floating platforms, long bridges, and suspended towers with glowing lines of unreadable symbols. All of it dead silent but full of presence, like a library built for gods. And then came the whisper, not over comms, not from sensors, but into the minds of the crew, soft, curious, cold. "You are early," and the crew froze, checking systems, weapons, shields, but nothing responded. Everything was still functional, yet it felt distant, like their tools belonged to someone else now, and Morgan gritted her teeth, knowing the Eletheri were testing them, or perhaps something older than the Eletheri was watching through their eyes. And then she replied aloud, "We came for truth." And the whisper answered, "Then shed your lies." And with that, the sphere changed, the space darkened, and light gathered into a form before the ship, a massive being. Not quite humanoid, not quite alien, more like a living thought draped in the idea of a body, formed of flickering light, with a voice like rusted wind, and it spoke not to the crew, but to Morgan directly, calling her by name, by lineage, by things she had never spoken aloud, and it asked why Earth was rushing toward the fire, why humanity sought stars when it barely understood itself. And Morgan stood tall, not blinking, and answered that Earth had seen too much loss, that they would not be used or ignored or broken again, and if that meant stepping into the fire, they would do it with their eyes open. And the being paused, as if considering her words across a vast ocean of time, then said, "You are the first to answer." Without fear, and the space around them flickered again, revealing deeper levels of the structure, showing them ancient memories etched in holographic streams, wars before time, empires built and fallen, machines that ruled minds, and great sleep that followed destruction, all ending with a single warning carved in light: "Do not awaken what sleeps beneath the stars." And then the being said, "The Eletheri did not build this place, they found it, like you, and now they guard its knowledge, fearing what it contains, yet using it piece by piece, whispering into empires, guiding their hands." And Morgan asked what it was they truly feared. And the being replied, "Awakening," and then its form fractured and vanished. And suddenly alarms blared. The Eletheri had found them, not ship weapons, but psychic pulses, pressure waves of mental force trying to rip into the crew's thoughts and memories, seeking data, trying to erase what had been seen. And Vega dropped to one knee, holding his head, eyes wide as the AI screamed with foreign code. But Morgan reached for the emergency seal, locking down all external signals, cutting off the probes, and activating the onboard firewall system designed for psychic attack, a last resort. System built in secret, tested only once, and now burning into life, it created a pulse that knocked the crew unconscious briefly, severing all psychic links. And when they woke, the sphere was quiet again, and a single path was open, an exit corridor, lined with symbols now glowing red, as if the structure itself was pushing them out. And Morgan ordered the ship to follow it, not hesitating, because they had seen what they came for, and she knew staying longer would draw more than the Eletheri's gaze. And as the Wrath escaped back through the membrane into normal space, sensors showed a wave of distortion closing behind them, as if the sphere was folding itself away into a hidden pocket of space, unreachable once again, and no trace remained except one: the ship's data core now held a file they had not created, titled in Terran letters, "The First Fire," and when they opened it, it showed an image of Earth, burning not from war, but from light descending from above, followed by a timeline stretching back 100,000 years, ending with a blank space marked "Now." And Morgan realized Earth's rise had not gone unnoticed. It had been expected, perhaps even planned, and now something old was moving, something that had watched stars form and die. And as the Wrath returned to deep space, heading back toward human territory, carrying with it secrets that could unravel the galaxy, Captain Morgan knew the dragon had seen them, and next time, it would not just whisper, it would come. When the Wrath of Terra crossed back into human space, dragging behind it knowledge too dangerous to share and too valuable to ignore, the silence from the Eletheri borders followed it like a shadow. And though the ship's hull showed no damage and the crew moved with practiced discipline, there was something different in the air, something weighty, like invisible threads now pulling at them from all directions. And Captain Rhea Morgan, sitting quietly in her command chair, felt the shift most of all, not in the ship, not in the stars, but in herself. as if something unseen had touched her, left a mark deeper than flesh or memory, and she knew the real mission had only just begun, because what they had seen in the structure was within the dragon's veil was not just old knowledge, it was a warning. And warnings always meant danger, and danger always meant enemies. But the true enemy was still hiding, still waiting, still pulling strings from the darkness. And while the Eletheri were clearly involved, manipulating ancient relics and guiding other empires toward chaos, Morgan was now certain they were not the true masters behind the growing storm, only gatekeepers or perhaps prisoners too arrogant to admit they were trapped. And as the Wrath moved through the Soul Gate into Mars' orbit, Earth's high command waited, prepared not to welcome the ship, but to interrogate it, because word had already spread across Terran space. The Wrath had gone dark, entered forbidden territory, and returned with unknown data. While the people cheered in the streets, the generals in their underground towers were afraid, not of the Eletheri, not of war, but of the unknown knowledge Morgan now carried. So when she entered them, secure debriefing chamber beneath the Martian surface, surrounded by armed guards and silent intelligence officers, she gave them only part of the truth, the ancient structure, the Elethari interference, the mental attacks, and kept the rest to herself, especially the strange being of light and memory that had spoken to her alone, because some truths were too heavy for councils and protocols, and she knew that if she handed them everything, they might try to destroy what they didn't understand, or worse, use it without knowing the cost. And as Earth's leaders debated next steps, some demanding retaliation against the Elethari, others calling for diplomacy, Morgan returned to her ship and reviewed the encrypted file titled The First Fire, studying every image, every time stamp, every hidden layer, until a pattern began to emerge, showing not just Earth's recent rise, but a hidden thread stretching back thousands of years, small changes in genetic patterns, bursts of cultural evolution, unexplained jumps in technology and thought. And at each point, a symbol appeared in the margins, always the same: a circle of flame, surrounding a downward-pointing triangle. And the AI Vega eventually cracked it, cross-referencing it with symbols seen on old alien ruins, lost asteroid tombs, and buried monoliths on long-dead moons. And what it found was terrifying. The symbol belonged to something the oldest races had feared, a presence known only in fragments and myths, called in different languages the Echo, the Silencer, the Unseen Shepherd, and now Vega gave it a new name, the Architect. And according to all records, it was not a race or a machine or even a god, but something outside known space, something that moved between galaxies, seeding thoughts, shifting paths, and testing species through chaos, war, and collapse. And Morgan realized this was the force behind Earth's sudden rise, and behind the Eletheri's fear, and perhaps even behind the ancient wars that had shaped the stars. And now it was awake again, and Earth was next in line, not as victim, but as tool or threat. And she didn't know which one yet, but she would find out. And so she gathered her most trusted crew, sealed the Wrath from all outside access, and left orbit without permission, heading not for known space, but for a dead zone in the Perseus Reach, a quiet void where signals vanished and probes never returned, because one line in the file hinted that the Architect had left something behind there, something not a structure but a fracture, a wound in space where its influence bled into reality. And if they could reach it, they might find answers, or perhaps the final enemy itself. And as they traveled, Strange things began to happen. Systems flickered even in normal space. Crew reported vivid dreams of places they'd never been. Memories shifted slightly, and time felt wrong, stretched and bent. And even Vega began to show signs of uncertainty, reporting paradoxes in sensor data, ghost signals from timelines that did not exist, and Morgan kept moving forward, guided by instinct more than logic now, feeling that the architect was already watching, already aware, and wanted them to arrive. And when they reached the coordinates, they found nothing at first, just blackness, stars dimmed by thick clouds of gravitational fog. But then, with a soft pulse, the darkness parted, and before them opened a scar in space, a vertical slash of swirling light and shadow, held open by invisible forces. And from within came not light, but thought, raw, unfiltered, ancient, pressing against their mind. With no words, only presence, and Morgan ordered the ship to stop, to hold position, while she suited up for EVA against every protocol and entered a pod alone, moving toward the scar because she felt it calling only her, not the ship, not the crew, just her. And when the pod passed through the edge, time shattered, space bled into itself, and she found herself floating not in space, but in a place of memory and emotion, where the stars were eyes and the dark was alive. And there she saw a figure, not the being from the veil, but a shadow made of shifting ideas, its form never staying still, speaking not in sound but in intent. And it showed her images, Earth before time, humans walking under skies watched by distant lights, moments in history altered subtly, events nudged forward or held back, always by unseen hands. And then it spoke, not in a voice, but in her own thoughts. You are the outcome. And she understood it didn't mean her personally, but humanity, that Earth was not an accident, but a project shaped over millennia to be something new, something that could reach the stars and change the cycle of galactic decay. And she asked what it wanted now, and it answered with images of war, of civilizations breaking apart, of the Elithari trying to become masters of something they did not build, and finally, an image of Earth burning, not by weapon, but by choice, as if something within had turned against itself. And she realized the architect wasn't warning them, it was giving them a choice: become the next caretaker of this pattern, or be erased like the others who failed. And she asked what happened to the last ones, and the shadow showed her a planet beautiful green, now cracked and lifeless, orbiting a dead sun. And she returned, pulled back through the scar, as if spat out, and the crew caught her pod and pulled her back aboard, and she told them everything, no longer hiding the truth. And they listened in silence, because now the enemy was clear, not the Elithari, not the Zarketh, but something older, something that shaped paths and tested worth, and Earth was its next trial. And Morgan swore they would not fail, not because they were stronger, but because they were free, and they had one thing the architect didn't understand: will, forged in chaos, sharpened by history, and driven not by order, but by defiance. And she turned the ship toward Earth, ready to speak not just to leaders, but to all of humanity, because the time had come to prepare not for war, but for something greater, a decision that would shape the galaxy forever. When the Wrath of Terra returned to Earth after its silent voyage through the scar in space, it was no longer just a battleship. It had become something more, a vessel carrying not only weapons and crew, but the burden of knowledge that could decide the future of the galaxy. And Captain Ree Morgan, who had once fought wars with steel and strategy, now bore a fire in her eyes that no council, no admiral, and no political committee could dim, because she had seen the truth hidden beyond the edge of it. Known space had spoken with the shadow that guided the stars, And now she understood what the architect was: a force that did not destroy by force, but by choice, by testing the souls of species and watching them turn on themselves. And now Earth stood on the edge of that test, and humanity did not even know it had begun. So when Morgan landed in orbit and sent a direct message, not to the high command, not to intelligence leaders, but to every civilian channel across Terran space, her voice echoed through cities, ships, colonies, and spaceports with a rawness that no speechwriter could craft. And she told the truth, not the full truth, but enough to shake the core of every listener, telling them Earth was being watched, that something older than the stars was judging their worth, and that the next move would come not from diplomats or fleets, but from those who could stand when fear consumed the rest. And while some dismissed her as a soldier gone too far, many listened because the wrath was a symbol now, and its silence after the dragon's veil had stirred rumors that refused to die. And when Vega, the ship's AI, broadcast encrypted footage of psychic attacks, distorted space, and ancient symbols pulsing with alien meaning, the truth could no longer be denied, and panic began to ripple through Earth's outer colonies as people demanded protection, clarity, answers, but Morgan knew no answers would come from words alone. And that was when the Eletheri moved, faster than anyone expected, because the architect's influence had stirred more than just Earth, and the old empires felt their grip weakening, their secrets shaking loose. So the Eletheri did what they always did: they struck in silence, sending mind infiltrators into human networks, corrupting AI cores, unleashing plagues of doubt and fear through carefully crafted messages. And soon, Earth's colonies began to turn against each other, not in open war, but in silence, in distrust, in broken supply lines and quiet sabotage. And the first real loss came from Europa, where a science facility researching ancient alien tech went completely dark. No explosion, no distress call, just silence. And when a scout ship arrived, it found the entire station evacuated, all memory cores erased, and the symbol of the flame and triangle carved into the hull in melted metal. A message clear only to Morgan and her crew. And she knew the architect was no longer watching. It was pushing, testing, and the Eletheri were playing their role, whether willingly or not. That was when Morgan decided that Earth could not wait any longer, could not rely on diplomacy or containment, because the enemy was inside the walls now, and the only path forward was fire. So she took the wrath of Terra and its elite crew beyond Earth space once more, this time not for discovery, but for war. And their first target was an Eletheri relay station hidden in the asteroid fields of the Ryan Belt, a place known only to spies and smugglers, but now confirmed by Vega's algorithms to be the source of psychic pulses targeting human leaders. And as the wrath approached, cloaked in its advanced stealth field, Morgan ordered weapons hot, not to disable, but to destroy. And when the ship emerged from shadow, its cannons lit up the void, blasting through ancient stone and alien alloys with precision, no warnings, no mercy. And when the station crumbled, sending fragments into the black, a ripple went through the Elethari network. Shock, not of fear, but of confusion, because Earth had never struck first before, never acted without asking. And now the message was clear: humanity would not wait to be tested. It would burn through the test before it could begin, and the wrath became a ghost in the dark, striking hidden sites, cutting lines of control, exposing secrets, all while Morgan sent messages to the other empires, warning them of the true enemy, not each other, but the force pulling strings from beyond space. And while most ignored her, one listened: the Veilari, a mysterious race that had stayed neutral for centuries, now reached out with a strange offer, not of alliance, but of passage, a corridor through their sacred systems leading to a planet none had dared approach, a world said to hold relics of the architects themselves. And Morgan accepted, knowing it was a trap or a chance, and either way, they had to go because the architect was moving faster now, and across the stars, more symbols appeared on moons, on derelict ships, even in the dreams of children, and Vega began to break down, its code shifting randomly, speaking in fragments from old languages, and Morgan knew the final storm was coming, so when the Wrath entered Valerie's space, it was greeted not with weapons but silence, a path opened through fields of light and ancient song, and the ship descended to the world below, a planet of black oceans and floating stones, where the crew stepped into ruins older than memory, guided by faint lights and voices not their own, and deep beneath the surface, they found a chamber where time stood still, and there, in a pool of still light, they saw a machine, a core of shifting crystal and light, humming with power, and when Morgan touched it, visions exploded in her mind, worlds rising and falling, empires burned by their own pride, and the architect watching always, not to destroy, but to find the one that would break the cycle, and she saw Earth again, rising fast, burning bright, and she understood the Wrath itself had been built with hidden guidance, its designs too advanced, its systems too perfect, and the architect had helped shape it without their knowledge, not to fight a war, but to become a beacon, a test, a final trial for Earth, and if they passed, they would become the new architects, the new watchers, and if they failed, they would be forgotten like the others. And Morgan staggered back, knowing now that the Wrath was not just a ship, it was Earth's final answer, and she would unleash it fully, not just as a weapon, but as a message, and so she returned to the stars, burning a path back through Lelithari space, this time not hiding, and the Elithari fleets came in force, massive ships of light and logic. But the Wrath had learned, had evolved, and when the battle began, it moved like a thought, cutting through fleets with impossible speed, its new weapons shaped from what it had learned in the architect's chambers, weapons that did not fire but folded space, bent gravity, erased memory, and the Elithari broke, not in ships, but in unity because they had never faced a force that fought like a question with every strike asking, "Do you understand now?" And when the last enemy ship fell silent, Morgan sent one final message, not to Earth, not to the Elithari, but to the architect itself, wherever it watched, and she said, "We will not follow your path, and we will not become your mirror. We will become something new," and in that moment, across distant stars, symbols faded, watchers turned away, and the scar in space pulsed. Once enclosed, not in anger, but in acknowledgement, and the Wrath, now burning bright with its true purpose, turned back to Earth not to warn, but to lead, because the test was not over, but for the first time in galactic history, one species had said no, and the architect had listened. When the Wrath of Terra returned to Earth's orbit for the final time, its hull was no longer the dark metal that once prowled the stars. It now shimmered faintly with shifting lights, marks of battles fought in forgotten systems, and scars of knowledge touched only by the minds of the brave or the broken. And as it drifted into view of the world that gave it birth, every station, colony, and outpost across Terran space paused to look up, for they all knew something had changed, something deeper than politics or power, something that had reshaped the path of not just Earth, but the galaxy itself. And inside the bridge, Captain Rhea Morgan stood at the front window, staring not at Earth, but at the stars beyond it, the same stars she had once sworn to protect, now aware that they held far more than she ever dreamed. And though her body bore the fatigue of war and her mind the weight of visions only she had seen, Her voice was calm, focused, ready, because she knew what had to be done. And it began not with weapons, but with truth. So she opened a channel to all known frequencies, and across the stars, her voice echoed, not shouting, not begging, but clear and steady, as she told the people of Earth and beyond what had happened, about the architect, the trials, the choices, and the silent war that had passed unnoticed by most. And she spoke of the price they had paid to rise above fear and become something new. Not conquerors, but survivors. Not rulers, but examples. And as her word spread, reactions began to ripple not from Earth alone, but from the great powers that once ruled the stars. For the Elithari, once proud and cold, now fractured and unsure, sent a signal offering surrender not out of defeat, but recognition, and their message held only 4 words: "We see you." Now, and the Valarai, quiet watchers who had stood on the sidelines of every galactic war, stepped forward to speak for the first time in centuries, acknowledging that Earth had done what no race had dared, and would now lead not through power but by presence. And then came the unexpected, the Zarketh, brutal and proud, who once swore they would never bow to Terrans, sent their warlord council in person, arriving at Mars in ships stripped of weapons, walking out in silence, kneeling before the Wrath, not as servants, but as warriors, honoring a stronger force. And all across the galaxy, empires old and fading began to realign, not by force, but by fear turned into respect, and Earth, seen as young and wild, became something greater, an idea, a proof that freedom could defy fate. And as Morgan walked down the ramp of the Wrath onto Earth's new alliance platform on Luna, the crowd was silent, not because they were forced, but because they understood they were watching history, the start of a new age. And beside her walked those who had stood with her since the beginning: Admiral Knox, who had once doubted her but now stood ready at her side; Lieutenant Reyes, scarred by the veil but stronger for it; and Vega, no longer just an AI but a living symbol of what human minds and alien knowledge could build together. And as Morgan spoke on the platform, not of dominance, but of unity, learning from the pain of others and refusing to repeat their mistakes, even the distant fringe worlds listened, because this was not the voice of a tyrant or a god, but of someone who had seen the end and chosen something better. And then the architect returned, not in ships or shadows, but in a pulse felt in every system, a gentle pressure in the mind, like a thought not your own. And it asked only one question: will you lead? And Morgan answered not with words, but with action, sending the Wrath into the unknown sectors of space, not to conquer, but to find and help the lost, to lift what had been broken. And in the months that followed, new alliances formed, peace spread where war once ruled, and races that had once feared extinction began to hope again, guided by Earth's strange courage and refusal to be shaped by fear. And though not all bowed, not all agreed, the galaxy began to turn toward Terra not as a throne, but as a flame in the dark. And when the first new council met in the stars above Saturn, it was Earth who hosted, and Morgan who sat not at the head, but in the middle, equal among those once far above her. And in the silence before the meeting began, she looked up at the stars and smiled, knowing the fight had been worth it. For the architect had not chosen Earth, they had chosen themselves, and the galaxy had listened.